right, welcome back for the second half of section 1.3. So we are working on learning target 3, which is classifying and comparing numbers. And actually what we'll be working on today is absolute value. Right now, before we start, I want to review the first half of learning. I want you to review the first half of this section, this learning target, which is what we went over in class today. So pause your video, write down and classify each of these numbers, and then come back when you're ready. All right, so here's what you should have. 3.95 is a rational number. Because it has that decimal, it's a terminating decimal. It can be written as a fraction, which fractions are rational numbers, and it's also real. All of these numbers are real. -4 is an integer. It is a rational number, and it is real. It is a fractional. Some people forget that, but you can always write it as -4 over 1. 0 is not a natural number. It starts off whole, integer, rational, real. Square root of 8 is irrational and real. And 12 is actually everything. It's a natural number. It's a whole number. It's an integer. It's a rational number. And it is a real number. And maybe just to come back to number 4, the reason why this one is irrational is if you were to take the square root, it is a non-terminating, non-repeating decimal. The decimal doesn't stop. It's not repeating in any pattern, so that makes it irrational. All right, so moving on. As I said already, we're doing absolute value today. So I'm going to kind of cover the notes maybe and go through. So what does absolute value mean? Absolute value is actually a pretty easy concept, and hopefully you guys will be okay with it. What it says distance from 0. Because distance is always a positive number, your answer from an absolute value will always be positive. I can't say, go run -3 miles. It doesn't work. Your distance that you were to run or move or drive in your car, whatever it is always a positive number. So there are two answers for an absolute, or two, you can take the absolute value of two numbers and get the same answer. Because -3 is 3 units from 0, 1, 2, 3, and because 3 is 3 units from 0, 1, 2, 3, both 3 and -3 would have the same absolute value. So it is your distance from 0. The notation for absolute value are 2 lines. So you can write, if I was doing an example, what's the absolute value of 5? Or what's the absolute value of -2? So those 2 lines are what that notation is. That's the symbols for it. And I guess I had these 2 examples right here. Absolute value of -3 and 3. So how do you find the absolute value of a number? So one way to do it is to say, hey, let's put these on the number line, and how far is it from 0? 1, 2, 3, that's 3. You can also say, okay, here's 3 on the number line. It is 1, 2, 3 places from 0, so the answer is 3. So one way is to draw a number line and count it out. Another way to say, hey, let's just make this positive, and that's what you get is 3. So, but we're talking about distance from 0, and that's why we're counting on the number line. Why don't you go ahead and pause the video and write down what the absolute value is of all of these 4 problems. Okay, so the first one, absolute value of 12, you should have gotten 12. It is 12 units from 0. If you draw that out on here, here's 11, here's 12, and if I count how many times, it is 12 units till it gets to 0 all the way around there. Okay, the next one, -2/3. It is 2/3 of a unit from 0. I'll change my color here. Here's about -2/3, and this distance in here is 2/3. That's why that answer is positive. Absolute value of 0, 0 is 0 units from 0. And then the last one would be 2.5. Absolute value of -2.5. The answer is it is 2.5 units from 0. Please mark any of them wrong that you got wrong and ask the question tomorrow in the class. For all of these, the first one's easier than the others. So why don't you go ahead, pause this really quick, come back, and then let's talk about it. All right, So here you go. This first one I said is easier. Negative 5, how far is it from 0? That's what those black lines mean, the distance from 0. It is 5. This one is tricky, and here is why. This negative is on the outside, so I'm going to leave that negative. I'm carrying it down. And then I'm finding the absolute value of 7, which is 7. So that's a tricky problem where I said, hey, absolute value of negative numbers is negative. But here I'm taking the absolute value of 7, which is 7, and I make it negative. Okay? Ask me a question on that tomorrow if you need. This one, the negative stays down, and then you're going to find the absolute value of negative 2.15. And the absolute value of negative 2.15 is 2.15. And you have that negative there. Circle any of those that you have questions on, and you can ask me tomorrow. Here you have some comparing problems. We talked about comparing a half greater than, less than. So why don't you take a second and pause this and see what you get for your answers. All right, here's what you should have had. 15 is greater than 14. So the absolute value of 15, color, is greater than the absolute value of 14. And it's because when we do this math, this is what we get. The next one is a little bit tricky. Remember what we said, this negative right out here is going to carry down, and you should then have negative 15, and that is less than, and the absolute value right here is 14, so that's a less than symbol. Over here, we have 9 halves. That is, and if you need to turn it to a decimal or a fraction, just so you know, this is 4.5 or 4.5, and this is negative 5 1/3. So when you're comparing these, you're now comparing 4.5 to positive 5 1/3, positive because you're taking the absolute value, and we know that 5 1/3 is bigger than 9 halves, so you have that. So a lot of thinking going on here. On this last one, I actually went ahead and did the decimals also. So here the decimal is 0.875, and here this is about negative, not about, but it is negative 0.6 repeating. And when you take the absolute value of that, you're left with comparing 7/8 and 2/3, and 7/8 is 0.875, and that is greater than 0.6. So let me know what questions. And then we have 2 more. And if you want, why don't you go ahead and pause this, and this is where we will actually do these 2 problems, and this is what we will start on tomorrow and go over in class tomorrow. So please let me know if you